Okay, welcome. I am Kyle Harris, and we are starting. I'm starting a podcast with my friend Audra May, and we are going to talk about a lot of things. Both Audra and myself are both teachers. We teach elementary physical education. We both run softball, baseball training facilities. Mine's in Ohio, hers is in Indiana. And we speak frequently, and we're hoping that we can use this podcast to help to educate other professionals that are either in the teaching world, the coaching world, or parents that are working with children, or even just anybody that wants to grow in life in any capacity. So our topics are probably going to be pretty broad, and a lot of times, maybe Audrey, you can correct me, we're going to probably streamline it back to softball and baseball because that's our world, or teaching. But really, my idea is to create a podcast that would help me in my everyday endeavor as a husband, a father, a coach, a teacher, and how to navigate that life and continue my personal growth while trying to inspire and motivate those around me to continue to grow and understand that one of the big things, one of my big philosophies is failure is an opportunity to grow. Failure is not bad. And I dealt with anxiety when I was younger that I didn't really even know was anxiety until almost the last couple of years. Like, I've really had to deconstruct myself and come to terms with it in the last couple of years, that when I was in high school and college, I did deal with a lot of anxiety, and I just didn't know what it was. I had no idea what that feeling was, and I didn't go about it probably the right way, but I've been able to learn from that, and I'm trying to embody that persona, that failure and being a little bit more open with myself, a little bit more vulnerable, can help me create opportunities to grow. And I would like other people to think about that and reflect so they can do that before they're 40 years old and really have a more fruitful life throughout their entire adulthood. So Audra, I don't know if you have anything to add to that right now.
Yeah, I think going off of the failures, those were my biggest learning points as a coach. Is I entered the college coaching world as a very young coach, and I epically failed. And I think that has built me into the professional instructor that I am today, and how I handle the young women that I deal with every day, the way that I handle the children that I teach every day, how I handle every human that I interact with, were those learning points of my failures. And I think that it's really important for people to remember that just because you failed doesn't mean that you can't redeem yourself or you can't make changes. Those failures are intended for us to learn and to grow. It's like a seed of your growth are those failures. Then you just have to water them so that you can grow as a human.
Yeah, for sure. I actually was thinking about that. I think I don't even know. I've been writing a lot lately, so I can't even remember everything that I've written. And I hate editing myself. So I'll write something and it'll just be like a brain spew on a Google Doc. And then I'll like start reading it and I can't stand it. Like, I can't stand my own voice. I was originally going to be a broadcast major and I nixed that because I just couldn't listen to myself. So I was like, I probably shouldn't do that. But I did. I'm pretty sure I wrote something, and in there I had a paragraph about how, every interaction we have with somebody is either a seed we're planting and watering and providing nutrients to grow, or it's the opposite. It's like planting a weed or putting poison on it. And we need to think about that and be really, really intentional with all of our interactions. And that can be really exhausting. And I mean, I'm not perfect. And with this podcast and with the writing, it's a lot of times it's like a personal confession of myself. It's a way for me to reflect on what my failures were through the day or the week. But I've been a lot happier, I think, the last 6 weeks trying to go back and do that. And not to fork off onto what we were going to talk about, but I talked to my buddy Nick that I alluded to prior to when we started recording this about COVID today. And I told him, for me, COVID was actually a beautiful thing because it was the first time that I can remember where I slowed everything in my life down and I had to reflect. And it was really good for me. Every night I cooked with one of my daughters. I played catch with my older daughter. I was doing Zoom calls with other professionals that were like-minded that I don't get to be with. And it was just a really, really cool period of time that, I mean, obviously there was other fears and things that made me anxious, and I was worried about people being healthy. But for me to have that period of introspection was really good for my personal growth. And then when that was over, it was like we went back to normal life and like hit the fast forward button 3 times. And it was me working 70 hours a week. And I went the entire school year without any of that introspection. And it was really hard for me. I went from really being probably more mentally healthy than I've been in a long time to probably being the least mentally healthy I was in a long time, because I wasn't exercising. I wasn't using that daily reflective period or meditating. And you and I have talked about that before. And you kind of helped me through trying to slow things down, because it was just go, go, go. And everybody wanted to come back in and get into our facility and train. And teaching was so different. And my kids were older, so they were more active. And it was just, it was really hard for me to go from so much meditation to none. And I just realized that today. So that was kind of a learning situation for me, was like, hey, I've got to really make sure this year when school starts, I might have to tell people no, and take some time daily to go on my daily walks, to exercise, to listen to music, to write, to do those things that are going to help me. Because if I'm not helping myself, I'm absolutely not going to be the best I can be for the other people that I want to help.
Yeah. And I realized too, as a parent, I found this the other day. My daughter and I were heading into work, and she's in the back seat, and we drive past a soccer field. Mind you, my daughter's 4 and she is highly active. So she's in ballet, gymnastics, she does horseback riding, and she just finished up t-ball from the summer. And she looks at me and was like, why am I not in soccer? And I was like, I have created a monster. You are a busybody monster, just like your mom. And I think that that's important as parents, that we remember and remind ourselves what we are putting our kids into, because if we're feeling that kind of exhaustion, running our kids around to different practices and different activities, what are our kids feeling? Are we surrendering quality time with our kids to keep them busy in activities? I think that there has to be some sort of balance in that too. And again, being able to say no.
Mm-hmm.
Naturally, I came home and I signed her up for soccer. So that's not my strong point. But I think that it's just something that my daughter's come accustomed to during COVID. Like you said, she was 2 turning 3. So it's not really an impactful time. I will forever be grateful for that time. My parents live out of town, and I went and stayed with my mom for the shutdown, and that's time that I would have never spent with her ever. And it was quality time that Harper got to like really get to know, her grandparents. So that was really cool. But yeah, now that I came out guns blazing, same thing as you did, like it was like I missed our athletes so much that it was like, we give a little piece of ourselves every day that we can't get back. Do I regret it? Absolutely not. But I think that that's something in our professional growth that we're both learning how to do, is set boundaries for ourselves as well.
It's like a drug. I mean, the more athletes I was working with last year, the more I wanted to work with. And it just never stopped. And like you said, like I wouldn't change that, but I definitely need to do things differently moving forward. And it's funny you mentioned that about Harper saying that and just being active, because our family's like that constantly. And, my mind's shooting off all different directions when you say that. And you talk about, using your time with COVID wisely. And I was listening to a podcast called The Daily Stoic, and the guy was talking about the Latin phrase amor fati, which means love your fate. And like everything that happens to you, love it. And I think as a society, we didn't do that. We're so used to moving fast. COVID hit and nobody knew what to do. And I think that was really difficult. Instead of them doing, taking the mindset that you did, like, I'm never going to get that time with my mom. I'm never going to get that time with my kids. That's the way to look at it. So every situation, no matter how dire, how bad, we can look at it and say, all right, how can I love this fate that's happening to me at the moment? How can I grow from that? And the other thing you got my mind just going on is when you said she wanted to go back to soccer. And I had this discussion with Lexi, who's my 9-year-old, who we made lay down one day and like take a rest. And she's like, I'm bored. And I'm thinking, I told her, and this is, I read this from Tim Elmore. And if you guys don't know who Tim Elmore is, you have to read him. He wrote a book about parenting that's phenomenal. He wrote the book Generation Z, great stuff. But he talks about being bored is good. That's when your mind processes stuff. And that's what people like you and I don't do enough of, is being bored and dealing with the crazy thoughts that might be going on in our brain and making sense of those. And if we don't kind of push our kids to do that at 8, 9, 10 years old or before, they're never going to do it. They're just going to, an article I wrote today or yesterday was about, I'm not modeling the behavior I want my kids to have when they're adults as far as mental health and taking care of myself goes. I'm not modeling that. And how can I expect my kids to do the things that I'm not doing? So I've tried to have discussions with my older daughter, Jaden, about that. And you mentioned the soccer thing, and we can get right into, after I say this, about exit strategies for seasons and careers, which we said we were going to talk about. But we make Jaden, she loves softball. Jaden's the girl that comes home from a tournament and practices that night. Like, she's the girl that will come home, and if it's dark, she'll get on an iPad and do vision training after a softball game. Like, that's Jaden. She's very, very driven. You never have to ask her to do anything. She asks you, and we make her take 4 to 6 weeks off. We have the last couple of years of softball when she's done. Can't touch a softball. When fall ball's over, you can't touch it until the new year. Last year it was December 1st, and I heard her go outside for school last year and realized it was December 1st, and I heard her yell, it's December 1st. So her coach this year, who I absolutely adore, her coach tells them after their last game they have to take 3 weeks off. On the way to the car after her last game, she says, you guys make me take at least a month off every year. We have to take 3 weeks off. Can my 3 weeks start right now? Like, she's already lobbying, which I love that drive, but it's like, you have to figure out a way to temper that, because there comes a time at the end of a season, or there comes a time after high school, or whenever it is, whatever you're doing, whether it's sports or, adults, when they retire, we have to think about exit strategies, because we're sending kids off that are super, super busy from high school, playing 3 sports. They're in multiple clubs, they're constant with their friends, and we're sending them off with no exit strategy on how to deal with their downtime and actually have a hobby or something to do that helps their mental health.
Yes. And I think that I never realized how hyper of a human or achieving I was until I was done with my playing career. I hit graduation and I was like, now what? Who am I? My identity has always been tied to softball. Who am I? Now what do I do? And not to mention, athletes are used to working out for hours and hours and hours, and then they stop and those endorphins aren't being released. And then you start to see depression. I think that there's so many things from the mental health aspect that we do not prepare young adults for in general. So we leave our careers, and so many athletes, I would say probably more of us than not, our identities have always been tied to that. It's been a part of us. We are always athletes. I still like to view myself as an athlete. I still enjoy going to the gym. I still enjoy competing. It just looks different now. But I think that those of us that, got so involved in sports and achieving, whether, any activity, we hit adulthood and we don't know how to stop, because that's all we know is how to be an achiever and how to keep going. You talked about it, you referenced it as like almost a drug of training different, more and more and more. Well, that's how we now view our careers, our everything. It's like, what's next? Softball has always taught us to, keep looking ahead, thinking forwards, what's next, what ball hit to me, what am I doing with it? Even up to bat, what's next? And I think that for sure is a mentality that I brought into my adulthood, which is good, but it's also a toxic trait of mine as well. So I think that's just something to be aware of as we're preparing our children for adulthood.
Well, and you know, being a coach, I mean, I coached high school ball for 12 years and I coached 1 year of college ball as an assistant. And as an assistant, it's way different. When you're the head coach, you have so much on your plate. Like, and the coaching aspect of it is such a beautiful thing that I love so much. But the bureaucratic like hoops you have to jump through for things, you know, and just the small things you don't think about when you're 23 years old coming out of college, like filling out bus requests and making sure you have the right equipment and making sure you have the concussion forms with you and all that. It steals a lot of time. It steals a lot of your bandwidth as a person, let alone a coach. And I think the beautifully altruistic thing about sports is that we can use it to teach intent. We can use it to teach lessons that we can use later in life. Like you talked about competing, you talked about working towards a goal. And that is an altruism of sport. But I think that even some of the best coaches at the middle school and high school levels, and I'm sure at the college level, don't relate that to their players. They don't relate that, hey, like this is our goal right now. They don't have those talks, those relationship and those lifelong talks with their players about our goal right now is this. This is our team goal. This is your individual goal. This is what you need to work on. And the skills you learn working to these goals, we need to figure out a way where you can use those and transition those into other aspects of your life when you're done playing. Maybe you will play professional ball, but at some point you're going to be a husband or a wife. You're going to be a father. You're going to be, you know, a son or a daughter. You're going to be an employee. How do we use the traits that you learned being a good teammate, working towards different goals to improve your athleticism, your skill, your physical fitness, your mental toughness? How do we apply those skills to other areas of life so you can continue to get that same satisfaction that you did when you were playing sport?
Right. Yeah, I think that the other thing to remember too when we're talking to our children or athletes that we train, I say this a lot too, especially our higher level athletes. You know, the sport or anything that you do, it's what you do, it's not who you are. And that's definitely not something that I learned. I mean, gosh, I think I'm still learning that, you know, being an instructor, being a teacher, it's what I do. It's not who I am. But you know, I'm a loving mother, I'm a spouse, you know, those things that are those tangible things that you can take out, but who are you? And that's a really deep question, especially when you're talking to children. I mean, even adults.
It's a scary question. I mean, it's a scary question for me to ask. And I was lucky. I always had a deep passion for music. So I would get tied up to that. You know, when I was in high school, it was always like, how's baseball going? How's your training going? And when I got to college, that changed. Like I had a coach in college my sophomore and junior year that I still talk to. And whenever he saw me on campus, it was, how's Kyle? How's Kyle? It wasn't how's, you know, how you feeling for baseball? It was, how's Kyle? And he did that to every single player. Mm-hmm. And he was just a huge mentor in my life that when I was coaching high school ball, I would call him and ask him for advice. And he would always relate it back to life and not baseball. And, you know, he actually resigned after my junior year and went to do service projects in Jamaica. He built houses and schools and taught. And he recently wrote a book that's phenomenal. And that is more where I'm trying to kind of wrap my life around is use sport, because I love sport. I love coaching. I love fitness and health and teaching, but that can't be like, that's not who we are. That is a piece of the puzzle of who makes Kyle, who makes Audra, who makes, you know, the kids that we're working with. And I think our kids get wrapped up in that, especially in today's age, because there's so much pressure on them in all aspects that it's just, well, I'm going to define myself by how much I can achieve in this area of my life. I'm going to define myself how much I can achieve here and here and here and here. And that's a slippery slope, because that's not where we need these kids to be, because they're going to be leading people in the next 5, 10, 15 years. And if they're constantly just trying to achieve and strive for achieving instead of learning to thrive and develop range, they're going to be in for a lot of trouble mentally when they're 30 and 40 years old.
Right. And I think the other thing that I didn't realize until my adult life is that everybody's view of success is 100% different.
Yeah.
The way that I viewed being successful in life or thriving is polar opposite from my husband. We couldn't be any more different. He is completely relaxed all the time, go with the flow. And I'm like, well, what are we going to do in 5 years? What are we going to do? And he's like, can you just enjoy right now? And I'm like, absolutely not. Like, but what are we going to do in 10 years? So those are those moments that you're just like, everybody's view of success is so different.
For people like you and I, that's important, I think, because my wife's very, very similar. Like, she wants to go to work and come home and be mom and be wife and be daughter. And like me, I'm like, all right, I want to go to work and I want to be the best like phys ed teacher I can be, like every single class. And like teach 10 classes a day, like that's really hard. And when you're really hard on yourself, like there might be 2 periods where you're like, man, that wasn't good. And like you dwell on it and it affects you a little bit. So then the great thing is like I can clean myself and wash myself up and boom, I'm off to baseball and softball. And there, like I literally give myself pep talks on the way to our baseball facility about, you got to bring your A game today. You have to be the best for all of these kids. And I usually get in there and that's where I get in the zone. Like that really is where I get in the zone is when I'm working there and I'll get in the zone and then I'll be coming home and it's 8:00 at night and now it's dad mode, and things are going and my wife works midnight. So it's like I'm cooking and getting everybody ready for bed. And then boom, next thing you know, it's 10:00 and it's like completely quiet. And all day it's just been noise, 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 go, 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 go. And like somehow now I have to figure out how do I decompress and figure all this out so I can sleep because I know tomorrow it's all going to happen again. And I'm getting excited just thinking about it, which is cool because I was a little nervous about the school year this year, but that's scary for me because if I don't want to have another year like I did last year, like I have to learn to bring it back down, get into my stomach a little bit, breathe, and allow things to settle.
Yeah.
And
I think even just journaling that in general, keeping notes, making lists. I'm such a list person, by the way.
There's nothing better than making a list and like checking everything off, right? Do you get that? Like, it's so good.
Walking in the morning. What's my list for the day? Yes.
Yeah. And then if you don't get it done, it's like, I'll wake up like at midnight and be like, oh man, I'm going to go make a list right now because I'm not going to be able to sleep. It's not healthy, but when you get that list done, it feels very good.
Right. So I know that we were talking about exits, but I think that we can even talk about this in like a youth aspect too. Travel ball is such a wonderful and great element, but it can also become so toxic for so many families and everything else. And, I've been having a lot of conversations in the gym. We talked about exiting even college or professions, things like that. But I think it's important to teach our kids how to exit with grace, just in general, whether that's a travel ball team, everybody's going to overcome adversity and there's a lesson behind it. And it's really hard to see it in the moment, especially when emotions and, travel ball is very expensive. So you have finances wrapped up into things. But when everybody can just sit back and breathe for a second, I think it's important to close every travel ball off with whatever your most impactful learning moment was and how you move forwards. And I think that is critical for coaches too. There's just so many things from the way that we speak to children to the way we train them, what are their biggest failures? I'm constantly messaging you like, hey, I'm seeing this trend in my hitters, like, why, what am I doing? Especially as coaches, if so many kids are doing the same thing, those reflections are important while closing those chapters so you can open up a new one to make those changes. The trends usually stem back from somebody. So what are we doing in our training or the way that we're speaking to our athletes that are causing these this part in the process? What does that look like? Why is it happening? I think as coaches and as educators, we constantly have to be questioning, why did you do that? I'm constantly asking the girls, and you can always tell the shy young ladies that are in the gym at first that they're like, why are you asking me so many questions? And I'm like, I'm just trying to process how you learn. If you just, what does that look like? Because I could say something to 5 different people and everybody is going to perceive it 5 different ways. And I think that is absolutely critical as, educators and coaches, that we are able to identify that. So.
Hi, Harper. It's funny you said that, because I've noticed trends at our place. Like years ago, it was everybody was kind of like out front a little bit. And then a couple years later, everybody was on their backside too much, and then like we had people, we were hitting too many ground balls. And then the next thing you know, there's a bunch of kids dumping their barrel, and I'm like, really, like, we got to be a little bit more intentional. And I've told our instructors, and I've told my dad, I'm like, and my dad's really good about it. Like, he's really good. Like, he doesn't have the same processes as we do, but just the experience he has working with so many kids, like, he's really good about, I'll say something to him and he's like, that's ridiculous. And then I'm like, you do it. Like, I watch you do it all the time. Like, you do that. And he's like, what? And I'm like, he's like, oh, well, that's just common sense. And I'm like, yeah, well, it's not common sense for everybody, because everybody hasn't been doing this, for 30 some years.
Right.
And like, he's in his 70s and he still reads stuff and he sends me stuff on Twitter all the time. He's like, what do you think about this? But you ask questions, talked about asking questions with your kids. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's only me being in my biased brain, but kids seem like they're spoon-fed information so much. And when you ask them, well, what do you think? Why? How can we solve this problem? They look at you. I had a girl from college we work with that she played down in Texas, and she just played some international ball for a branch of Team USA. And I'd ask her questions and she'd stare at me like, I don't know, you tell me. And I'm like, you are a legit, like, collegiate hitter that mashes. And what's your process? She's like, I don't know. I just think a lot and then I do what you tell me to do. And I'm like, we got to get past that.
Yes.
And the kids are like that too. And that's probably one of the things I'm the most proud of myself as a dad with Jade, and my oldest daughter, is I pretty much am like, oh, let's hit the ball as hard as you can in the air. And what did you, on this at bat, what did you think? I don't know. It was this happened and this. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. You're processing that information on your own. Like, she doesn't come to me with those questions. She does. I know something's really wrong. Like, one time this year, she was like, what's going on with my swing? And I'm like, nothing. I got video right here. It looks absolutely perfect. You just hit the ball off the end of the bat. So, I mean, it's just timing. She's like, oh, okay. But we have got to, and you do it the right. It's like the Socratic method, trying to ask them what's going on, why. And kids are really uncomfortable with that because they want to be given the answer, not. And I think as educators, we have to really be aware of that, because that's not what we want for growth.
Yeah.
Like, you're constantly given an answer. It's really hard to continue to grow in your life, because you're like, well, I got to get the answer right because so-and-so said this is where I need to be, so I need to be there. And that's really not, that's not a mentally healthy way to live life. And that's not a way to kind of be successful and transcend your job, your occupation, your well-being, whether you're a husband or a wife. You want to constantly get better and grow and realize that where I was last week, I should be farther ahead next week. And where I was years ago, I should be way farther next week than I was there. And if we're constantly just being spoon-fed, that doesn't happen. We don't build that section of the brain that problem solves.
And I think that what else is important too is I think as parents and as coaches, I mean, we view and we get viewed as products. So, a lot of students come in and we are viewed, if things aren't going the way, then, and I get that way even with Harper, like she goes to school and I'm like, why are we not moving quicker on learning whatever we're learning? Is it something on my end? Are you not doing this properly at school? Are you not paying attention?
Mhm.
Like whatever that looks like. And I view her school as a product and I shouldn't.
Right.
And I think that is completely something that, I got to change as a parent. And I got to remember that, my daughter is different. Every kid is different. I'm different. Everybody is going to learn and perceive things differently. So, oh no, thank you.
I think that's natural because the way school, I think, has been pushed probably from even when I was finishing through now. It's sad to say, even as a teacher, it's really sad to say. It's hard for me to say this, but parents, I think, even they look at their kids as a product. How are you going to make this product better? Instead of looking at them as a human. Like, what's going on? Like, Susie's having trouble with her math facts, so she needs remediation. She needs to stay in from recess. She needs to go to summer school. She needs to do this. Well, what's going on at home with Susie? Like, is she getting enriched at home? Maybe her parents split up. Like, does she have any hobbies that she enjoys? Does she have a friend? Does she have somebody she can talk to about things? Like, what's going on with her as a human being? And that's really important. It's one of the reasons I love kindergarten, because they come in and you teach them, and it's just so easy to get to know those kids, and they just enjoy being there. And then somehow, as parents and adults, we push that right out of their souls, and then spend the latter part of adolescence trying to get that back into them after we've robbed them from it when they're 6, 7 years old.
Right. And I think that, travel ball is such, I keep going back to travel ball, and it's such a beautiful thing, but
it's what we know.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. But yeah, we take that away from students or, athletes unintentionally in the travel ball world. If you do not produce this weekend, you're either out of the lineup or, you're batting last, whatever that looks like, goodness, I think that I had expressed this in the past, how I've heard, 10, 11, 12-year-olds not batting all their kids. And even as far as 14 and 16, I'm like, I don't you know what I mean? We're going to have great weekends. We're going to have bad weekends. But we as a community, as a softball community, as everything, like we have become so result driven, and that's affecting our youth. It really is. And they have all the knowledge in the world. They are fully aware of what's going on. They have had access to Google their whole life. I think that this generation is so mature beyond their years. But we have to nurture that. And we have to be more aware of that as well, especially as educators and instructors and coaches and parents. They're exposed to so many things. So, and all those messages they're being stored very quickly.
Well, like Patrick Murphy from Alabama said, he said, past generations wanted to know, what could you do for them? This generation wants to know, how can I build they want to build relationships. They want communication, which that's a beautiful thing. Like, that's a good thing. Instead of thinking, oh, well, this is bad, this kid needs so much. No, that's a great thing. Like, that's the human side, the human element of what we do. And that's really that's why we teach. That's why we coach. That's what we should be embracing. That's why we want to be parents, for God's sakes, is to have that connection. And this generation wants that more than any other generation. So we should all, as adults, be ecstatic. Yes. We have to get through our own, whatever it is, to realize that and figure out that we need to reach out and meet them where they're at. Because, I'm coaching 9U now, or last summer I coached 9U. We're 10U next year. And we played C-level tournaments. And there were teams that roster batted, like C-level tournaments that roster batted. And I'm like, oh, like there were times I had a rolling lineup. Like, oh, you made the last out? Well, you're the last batter next game. So we can, and I didn't always do that, but There were times that I did, because I got 8, 9-year-olds on my team that my biggest thing is I want to get them to come back to practice. I want them to be like, I got practice tomorrow. Yay. I get to see Coach Harris and all my teammates. Like that's, I keep using the word altruism, but we want to get them passionate about softball. We want to get them passionate about something so they can use that passion then later on in life and know, hey, I know how to be passionate about something. I know how to work towards a goal. I know how to learn from failure and fail forward and use failure as an opportunity, not as, oh man, if I go 0 for 3, mom and dad are going to scream at me and it's going to be a 4-hour ride home that sucks. And then next week I'm going to bat 9th. Like that. Should we really have 8, 12, 16-year-olds thinking like that? That's not where we want them to be. Like, you loved playing softball. I love playing baseball. I want those kids to be like, all right, next week I was 0 for 3. How do I figure that out? What can I do better? All right, I'm going to do that. Coach told me this was the process to focus on. I'm going to focus on that process. I'm not going to focus on my results. This is what I'm going to focus on because I can control it. Mm-hmm. And that's the stuff that you can use after sport. That's the stuff you can use when your season's over and you're moving into a non-athletic period where you need to focus on schoolwork, or you need to focus on being a good sibling, or you need to focus on whatever else it is that you choose to focus on. But that exit strategy, in my opinion, needs to be taking the lessons you learned about process and learning from failure and just applying it to something else that has nothing to do with the thing you're taking a break from, whether it's softball, basketball, basket weaving, guitar playing, whatever.
And I think even, it's tryout season right now in the softball and baseball community. And I think that more than anything, I am so tired of seeing the generic messages go out. If a kid takes the time to come to your program's tryout, you owe them, just like if we were to go in for a job interview and not get hired and we ask why, or, what can I improve on, or what did you see? Athletes deserve the same amount of respect with that. I think I saw a generic email last year that was like, please keep playing, please come to tryouts next year. And, but it didn't tell anything to that young lady as to what specifically she needed to improve on.
Yeah.
What did you see that, didn't, get, what specific things do you need her to get better on, and why?
Right.
To be a fit for your organization. I think that, anytime I've ever interviewed, for example, I had interviewed a few times for a high school weights coach, and I didn't get it. And I was just like, but why?
Right.
But why? And I think it's important to understand why. Like, what did you see in the gaps of my resume?
Mm-hmm.
What would make me a better candidate? Did I just not interview well? What is that? Whatever that looks like, I think that we owe that to each other. If we take the time. Yeah.
When you want to get better at something and you don't hear that, that's 10 times worse than the rejection to me. And I know that you kind of had a situation like that recently. Mm-hmm. And I had a situation like that where I had somebody reach out to me with a dream job offer. And I went through this whole, I don't want to say arduous. It was long. It was hard. And I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot doing it. And I really thought I did a great job in the interview. I made it to the second level of the interview and then nothing. And then I saw somebody get hired for that position. And I reached out to that person. I said, hey, what can I do to get better? Like, why did I not get this spot? What do I need to do to get better? I want to learn, whether it's working with you or working with somebody else or keeping with the job that I have now. Like, I want some feedback. And I, really took some time, and I had 3 or 4 people read the email, and I sent it and never heard a response. And it's difficult because you want to know, like, all right, maybe I'm not made for that position. Yeah. And if it's a personality thing, if it's something, that I can't control, cool. But if it's something that's skill related or me performing that job that I can do better, I want to know what I can do to fix it so I can get better.
Mm-hmm.
whether it's for you, whether it's for me to get that job, or whether it's just for me to help people, like when I'm working with somebody, I want them to have the best version of me. So if you have some feedback for me, man, bring it. I want it.
Yes. And I think that, the positions that we are in and other, even just parents in general, I remember last year, I kind of had noticed that Harper was like regressing in some of her schoolwork. So I'd reached out to the teacher. I think the biggest thing is like when you start to see those moments, or even before those moments start to happen, we have to have those relationships. You need to have those working relationships, that partnership with your coaches, with the parents, with your kids. Everybody needs to be, because at the end of the day, we're all in it for them, or we're partners. You know what I mean? I think too many times we see it a lot in our sport where it's, coach versus parent, or, anything of that. For whatever reason, this divide has been created. It's kind of like coaches and umpires. Like, why did we create that divide?
Us
Or
versus them. It's not
yeah,
positive. It's not
like,
healthy.
why don't we just work together instead of complaining about the umpires? Like, how do we get them better? For
Mm-hmm.
example, like college coaching, umpiring, we don't pay them well.
Mm-hmm.
We don't. This is a secondary job for them. So we're getting exactly what we're
What you
putting
pay
into
for.
it.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
um, so the same complaints or the same divide is usually like it's self-inflicted. Like we're causing that, where we'd much rather just work with people. I think that partnership and, going back to building those relationships, it's critical. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's good stuff. Do you have any other insights on, like, I know we kind of like danced around it a little bit, that whole exit strategy of a season or whatever. I mean, me personally, I think it falls back on the parents and the coach to have to have, like you said, relationship. Have the relationship where you can talk to the player and be like, hey, what is your exit strategy after this? Do you want to play college softball? That's great. I want you to make sure you feel strong enough as an individual you can talk to your college coach about an exit strategy after that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the important thing, is because as coaches and teachers, we do teach these kids the skills they need, but we don't tie it into how they can use it as an exit strategy for when they're done playing, when they're done with sports and things like that, because you see, like you said, the physical activity decreases. And if you had to eat 4,000 calories to maintain your weight, now you only need 2,000. And what's going to happen? More energy in versus energy out. That's going to affect your physical health, which can, for some people, can affect their mental health even more. So we have to talk about what's your exit strategy? What are your plans? And what is your outlet for this competitiveness? What is your outlet for your time? What is your outlet to express yourself? And I think that falls back, as I said, on the parents and coaches to have those conversations with kids, maybe even their sophomore, junior years in high school. Like, what else do you like? Start thinking about this.
Right. Yep, I agree 100%. Being able to be open enough for those conversations. Once you ask the questions, you have to be open enough to hear the truth, or hear, so many times it makes me think about back when I was coaching in college. I had asked one of my former players of like, how do you perceive me? And I always had this like little notebook, and they thought I only wrote like mistakes down in it. But then I quickly realized that, at the end of the day, the game, I was only like pinpointing the mistakes. I put good things in there? Absolutely. But I was not drawing attention to that.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really hard to hear. But I had opened that exit, in that exit meeting, I had opened that conversation of, how are you perceiving me? I
Mm-hmm.
think that, having those vulnerable moments with your athletes are really important. If you want them to be open to you, you have to be vulnerable with them, and you have to be
Yes.
open and honest with them as well. And I think, at the end of the season, thinking about exit or at the end of a chapter, I always think that it is important, even like when I was coaching softball, I'm not a field coach, though. Those of you that don't know me, I do not coach on the field anymore. I'm just in my four walls. But when I'd field coach, if plays were being ran or things like that, at the end of the day or at the end of the game, I'd go ask the other coach, like, what did you see? What did you see? So that was like our exit leaving. Like, why did you do that?
Mhm.
And it showed, our gaps. I think that when you are leaving or closing a chapter, you have to know what you can improve on, or, you have to have those plans, those goals, like you were talking about, so that you know how to move forwards. Um, and if it's completely a closed door, that's okay. Every piece of adversity has a lesson. We just have to learn. We have to figure out what that lesson is.
Yeah, and maybe it's not even maybe you don't even know what you're going to do next, but you have to know there's something next, and maybe there's 5 things that you're going to try.
Right.
But I think it's important that we, have those conversations and maybe even make something concrete. Like, hey, I'm going to try this, and if I don't like it, I'm going to try this. And we have those talks with kids, and it might go in one ear and out the other for some, but if they come back to that conversation 5 years later, that's a win for that kid.
Right.
And that's really what we're here for. Is we're here to create people, hopefully, that are productive citizens, good spouses, good parents, and that want to continue to grow so they can be mentally healthy and enjoy life. That's really what we want to do. Is we want to be happy individuals that want to get up in the morning and enjoy this beautiful thing that we've been given, that is, humanity.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, Audra, thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Hopefully the audio works on this. If not, we've got a great Zoom video that I'll share on YouTube, and we'll figure out another way to do it. If anybody's listening to this, thank you for listening. And if you guys have any comments or anything, let us know. Both of us are on Twitter. I'm at HossJob13, I believe, and I think Audra's at Accelerated Fast Pitch Academy.
Yes.
So you can find us there, give us feedback, and just talk to your kids about exit strategies after seasons. Talk to them about exit strategies at the end of their careers, and try to help them move forward and understand that failure is a beautiful opportunity to grow and get better at all aspects of life.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.